Welcome to another episode. It's that time of the year again where we can look back on the year and reflect. And today we have three guests to give their takes on the winners, losers, and some other things that went down in 2025. Welcome, guys. Why don't we start with really quick intro?
All right, I can start. I'm Dom. I'm head of strategy at Li.F. I'm in charge of all the dumb new ideas that we have and making sure that we have to hire more developers.
I'm Marko. I run the team on the jumper side and in charge of running the team on the jumper side.
Very concise. Hello, all. I'm Jim. I am a product lead at Li.F. I lead the Intents product and our Composer Zaps product.
Awesome. Why don't we first tell everyone how much do we remember about 2025 before going into our takes for the years?
I don't remember a lot. I've stopped remembering since I sold everything into stables. There was nothing to follow. So it's going to be a hard one. Let's try.
Nice. Do you remember, what's your high of the year, by the way? Like 2025. What do you actually remember? If somebody says 2025 in crypto,
So I think it's one of the most paradoxical years since this industry exists. I don't think that we've ever had more actual advancements and permeation of the industry, just in general, from a regulatory perspective, stablecoin adoption, etc. While at the same time there was just like meh feelings by the participants. I don't know. It's just like it's the year that I feel most people feel most jaded, even though the industry has like grown the most in a way by where and how it's used.
I mean, the prices are not moving in the right direction. That's the simple takeaway.
Yeah, can call it that way.
News is good, price not so good.
Yeah.
Dom, what do you remember about the year?
What do I remember? Yeah, I mean, the US legislation is probably the biggest thing. I would actually say I remember going to a lot of countries to go to a lot of conferences. At these conferences, don't ask me which countries. I don't remember those. I think generally it's kind of funny because the sentiment is the best and the worst at the same time. I feel like everybody that's building on more the institutional side or in verticals that have product market fit like perpetuals or interoperability or generally asset swapping, they are quite bullish, while the wider market and crypto Twitter is very bearish, which I think is probably just, in some way the market growing up.
I mean, there are a lot of takes on the timeline that basically say that we're about to go into a very good phase for crypto, but not one that people will like because of exactly what you guys said, right? Like there's so much adoption, but the prices will not necessarily reflect that at all times. And there will just be lesser and lesser money making opportunities because the industry has grown up, right? So there's less of asymmetry left in the market.
Well, there will always be opportunities to make money, right? Like the thing is, the market moves in cycles and the market moves in microcycles, right? I mean, a lot of the money that has been made in the market is while there is speculative, momentum in some specific vertical or pocket. And usually that leads kind of to a new market vertical emerging. And we've seen that now with perpetuals this year with Hyperliquid and the first one obviously is the moneymaker. Like Hyperliquid was the moneymaker, and every other order book DEX that launches a token afterwards is kind of that meme, which is normal, right? Because there's no easy wins. Like you can't just run the same playbook over and over and over again and keep winning. I think we all learned that. We all learned that in 2021 with Fox that does not work.
And NFT
Also,
projects.
Yeah, and there's a lot more sophisticated, I guess, traders or institutions trading against us, which doesn't make it any easier.
Okay, I mean, we're not market experts, so obviously Marko is definitely not a market expert, so don't take his opinion. Everybody else, I'm not too sure.
Well, you can take my opinion and do the opposite, and you're probably going to excel. So,
Marko's an expert at getting liquidated.
yes.
Cool. Why don't we start with the first question? So, what narrative about Interop died in 2025? And we'll start with Jim because last year a lot of us front ran his answers, so we'll give him the floor.
Narrative died. Bridging, I feel like, died as a concept. Like the fact that like you have to go to a separate UI to like move the same asset and then go to another UI to like either swap that asset or like perform some sort of action is just kind of like an outdated behavioral pattern, in my opinion. Like there are so many like amazing products out there that are trying to simplify that experience. And so you can, in one step do multiple things that you originally had to take multiple steps and go to multiple websites to do. And so the fact that like, I'm thinking about in like 2021 or 2022, I had to go to the Polygon bridge site or the Avalanche bridge site to like bridge the same token or like an equivalent version of it. And then I had to go to like Aave or like some fork or some Uniswap fork to perform some sort of action. Now that is like a completely obsolete idea.
I mean, but the on a front end level, like people are still very used to using a single front end for bridging, right? Like I'm sure Marko would have opinion on that.
Well, I'd actually like the data really proves what Jim is saying is the distinction of the users that have separated these actions is getting like smaller and smaller. So even this year we've basically tried to separate the swap and bridge and kind of to see how users are going to respond to it. And it was basically worthless. Like it's most of the users that we have today, they do think in context of a swap. And that swap can be anything by like same chain, cross chain, any asset, doesn't really matter. So I think like we are there. That we can kind of ignore the separations that we created, 4 or 5 years ago.
I think it's definitely a trend that we've seen. I think I remember last year I said that the biggest bridging winner was Phantom because like Phantom was kind of early to the trend of embedding, that functionality into their wallet, powered by LI.F. And then I think what we've seen industry-wide, but also within the team this year is that essentially every other wallet followed that example. Like we have almost every wallet has functionality now. Every wallet, every major application has made it a priority to get this functionality in some form. So I think like Jim's take is accurate in the sense that like bridging as like a standalone action is becoming less and less of a thing.
Yeah. And also, like it feels almost commoditized to a point where like you need like one of the reasons that we're venturing out of just bridging and swapping on the jumper side is that we're kind of recognizing that these actions are just becoming so inherent and so commoditized and so low level that you need to give users basically the ability to do everything at once, and not use plethora of different like protocols, UIs, and whatever to do what actually are a very simple thing to do.
Yeah, I think my take is related in a sense that this year nobody was talking about how bridging sucks. I think that take is very old now, and everybody is on the side of like, okay, intents are here, everything is quick and fast. Like people don't even realize that it's a bridge transaction anymore. In general, people are of the opinion that bridges don't suck anymore, and I think I cannot tell the difference between most of like my swaps and bridging unless sometimes there's like a 10-minute transfer or like a 20-30-minute transfer. What
For
about you
me,
guys?
chain abstraction was gone as fast as it came, as a narrative, at least. So I feel kind of vindicated on that because I think I was yapping about that last year quite a bit and got annoyed by, there was like a plethora of protocols that never figured out what they are doing or what their product is. So they just like branded, oh, we're now doing chain abstraction. And yeah, I don't hear that anymore at all. So I'm pretty happy for that.
Yeah, I agree with that take. I think it's like my takeaway as well. Is essentially like this new type of UX has been proposed, it turns out it still very much matters where your assets live. And also like in a way, as we as Li-Fi, but also the ecosystem as a whole moves to interoping between more and more different like non-EVM chains, chains actually have become like more important again. Because like, you know, in the context of like non-EVM to non-EVM chain, the chain very much matters. And there's very different like trade-offs to interacting via these different chains.
Yeah, I also think like last year, like I agree with you, Marko. There was kind of like this category of projects that were branding themselves as chain abstraction, and they were very like wallet first. They're like, hey, we are like a chain abstracted wallet that can do all this stuff. But then what we've seen is that legacy wallets just adopt, you know, interoperability projects that can do chain abstraction just as good as these wallets can. And so we didn't really need to have this like segment of projects, right? And a lot of them have kind of pivoted or done something else since then. Like interoperability projects are better suited to do that than necessarily wallets can. And I think like broadly, if you even like zoom out, when you think of like chain abstraction as a, you know, topic from like a wallet perspective, if you think about like 7702 and the related projects there, their take on solving chain abstraction or solving interoperability complexity has not taken off as much as just like normal cross-chain projects, just solving it through like solvers or however they're solving it, right? So that's
Yeah.
kind of been an interesting observation.
True. And also, like, kind of what Dom said as well, is we live in an era where chains themselves have to go really hard on differentiation. And by an extension, it becomes way more important, like what chain you're on or why you're on that chain, right? So
Yeah, I think like Mega launching is kind of like it's going to depend on how well Mega does when it launches, but I think like their strategy from the beginning has been like that the chain is kind of like tribal, and like the tribe needs its own, you know, its own people, its own products. And I think the era of like copy paste layer 2s where you have the same 7 protocols launching on a new chain is kind of over. Probably made never really sense to begin with, because in a similar fashion how interoperability is kind of commoditized, as Marko was saying, like creating a chain is also kind of commoditized. So the new era is the era of distribution, which is good and bad. Like it's good for certain players in the market, bad for other players in the market. It's good for an infrastructure company like us. There's tons of new companies coming into space, but they're coming with their existing distribution, and they very much don't need a lot of these chains that people have been creating for we don't know reasons.
Okay, why don't we move on to the next one? Who were the winners for you guys? Who dominated 2025?
Well, I guess the biggest winner is kind of related to what Jim was saying. If bridging is kind of like the biggest loser of the year, then Intense is probably the biggest winner. This was probably the year where Intense finally, you know, came into their own from being a theoretical concept to actually seeing multiple intent-based protocols in production, doing really well. We have Layer 0 changing their stance on intents and integrating intents into the Stargate front end after, you know, a long debate where they were really, really against intents, and basically every other major bridging provider moving towards having fully intent-based system or having at least a intent-based system.
I think that was the biggest pivot, at least in terms of like product strategy, right? Like just Layer 0 having intents in the stack at this point. Like I understand their reasoning, but considering how hard they went against intents by like market forces or just the ecosystem piling that narrative, but it was pretty interesting to see that Stargate now has intents.
maybe they just needed someone like Joshua to like do proper math on it for them.
Maybe. Marco, what's your answer? Who's the biggest winner?
Biggest winners, I would say MoonPay, Stripe, Li-Fi, and any company that managed to do acquisitions this year. I feel this was like the most amount of acquisitions year that we've had ever, or at least maybe I've like followed it differently. What?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like if there's too much of something happening in a year, generally it's not a good thing.
So I think like it is a signal of a few things, right? So first, tech convergence, larger players being more confident into what their future outlooks are and where to put their money. And then in general, like it is like it's a sign of a very maturing industry to be able to have like acquisitions and mergers on this scale for me. So this is in general like a big win for the industry, and especially big win for the companies that were well positioned to do that. Because it's kind of, I don't know, we've been like 20 years almost at this as an industry, so it was time to grow up to that level.
I think I always say like nobody wants to miss that rocket going to Mars. You know, like it's like you don't want to be in the right industry but the wrong company. And so like that's I think where a lot of like acquisitions come from, is people realizing, okay, the industry is maturing. It's becoming like you need to be a bigger company if you're a small startup. You become more and more a feature of bigger teams or bigger products. So like you either join a team that probably is going to have a seat at the table in this new world, or you kind of like spend a lot of years working on something and there's no payoff. And that's
Also,
I think a scary thought to a lot of people.
It's a natural progress of verticalization, and verticalization is currently happening all across the industry, on the B2B and B2C side. And this just seems like a normal side effect of that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think like crypto for a long time has been kind of like a tech first industry. And there's been a lot of projects that promise kind of various innovations on similar segments or similar products. And now we're kind of seeing that like, we saw a divergence and now we're seeing like a convergence, right? Like a lot of this tech is becoming very similar, or even if it's slightly different, there is synergies that combining them under one team. And so we're seeing kind of like winners accumulate all this great talent, all these like, slightly different, slightly more innovative products, and leveraging the large distribution they have, especially these like larger players like Stripe and such, in order to make shit happen.
I think my answer is very like biased by Interop. I feel like Interop had a big year in a way, because at this point it's guaranteed day one infrastructure for chains and asset issuers. I don't feel like that was the case last year. Like any chain that has launched this year, every launch has been proper, right? Like they would have all the bridges supporting it from day one. They would have assets issued on like some of the Interop token standards. So from like an Interop perspective, I felt like we were at the core of every launch, from like a chain to an asset issuer. And the volumes are also showing that sort of uptick, right? Like from 2022, for example, we're up 100x in terms of volumes, and in 2025 we had some weeks where we hit $10 billion in volumes. I feel like that I don't think there'll be a flippening with like the swap market, but at least we will have numbers that will be comparable with the swap market, and that's the moment that all of us have been waiting for, right? Like we've been saying, as soon as the numbers start looking good, we'll have more solvers, more players come in, and I think like we're almost at that point.
Interoperability is not a category anymore.
Like, 4
interoperability
years into
is
the
crypto,
industry, and you still can't say interoperability.
because I was only saying interop, and it's my second language. Come on, man.
It's okay.
But yeah, it doesn't feel like it's a specific category anymore. It's so inherent to everything and fundamental that it just has to work from a user perspective, chain deployment perspective, or whatever. So really, really proud, like especially going back to like 2021 and 2022, where I've been in 45-minute long conversations trying to explain why people should even care about multi-chain future. Right? Like, this was like pre-Arbitrum. I was trying to explain, hey, like you need to put like cross-chain tools on your map. Like people will use more chains at a time where like 97% of volume and activity was on mainnet. And to be here in 4 years is just, amazing.
I have to say, Marko has read the state of Interop properly, because all of his examples and all of his takeaways are directly in line with what is written.
This means Arjun's a great writer. Yeah.
And if you look at like the biggest players in the space, especially this year, like they've been publicly saying how much they care about Interop, right? Like obviously the EF has spent a lot of effort this past year thinking about Interop with two big initiatives, EIL that came out last month and OIF that was percolating throughout the year. And Off-Chain Labs is like all in on Interop. They're spending a lot of time building Broadcaster. And so there are a lot of really big teams that think a lot about Interop, right? Circle, obviously, with CCTP and with their latest acquisition. And so like people like they're realizing that Interop is just like super foundational to the success of like an even larger business.
Okay,
Great.
let's move on to the next question. Biggest loser of the year. What flopped for you guys?
I'll start.
Go
I'd
for it.
say I'd say biggest loser or biggest flop of this year was honestly, I think like Bitcoin Interop. Honestly, like I'm just thinking back to how much hype it had this time last year when we were recording this. And since then, Thorchain's had a number of issues that they face. I don't think we've seen a ton of all-time volumes on the other competitors. There's a lot of promise of all these Bitcoin L2s and all the volume that they would bring. That didn't really happen either. And so that's been kind of like, disappointment looking back from this episode last year.
That's a
Yeah.
great take. I think that
Yeah.
went under the radar for a lot of people. But I remember last year we were all talking about how Bitcoin is the best asset and like there's so much volume, but literally nothing happened this year. And
I think
actually it went downhill.
I think like one thing that we've all kind of missed is we all looked at Bitcoin and Bitcoin holders with the same lens as we look at any other asset. And the reality that kind of hit now is whoever wanted to make their Bitcoin productive, they already did that in the past who knows how many years. And the people that do hold Bitcoin for its like historical purpose or like store value or whatever, they won't indulge in additional risks with their Bitcoin. And therefore, they're not going to make it productive. They're perfectly fine just holding it.
So do you guys think next year Bitcoin volumes will look better or worse?
Volumes of what? Like just trading volume or
I mean, from a cross-chain context, let's put it that way, because we're talking about bridging.
like I would make a bet today that like it's going to be very insignificant.
Yeah,
I mean,
think it's
the
gonna look
Bitcoin
worse.
volumes, the Bitcoin volumes are not that low. I mean, they're quite good. They're just like concentrated on a few large institutional players, in a few integrators, and they basically do all of the volume. I agree with Jim that everything that's kind of like been done on the retail side of like Bitcoin Layer 2s and like all of that stuff flopped. There is significant like transaction volume between like Bitcoin and Ethereum, Bitcoin and Solana, and I guess now Bitcoin and Zcash. But those are very like, so very limited to certain players in the market, and most of those players in the market are people that have been around long time, and are more on the safer side of things. So I think for the retail newer generation market participants, their dopamine receptors are so fried they're not trading Bitcoin.
Yeah.
What about you guys, Marko? Go for it.
For me, what flopped this year and the biggest losers are basically all new chain deployments. It's a very, very tough environment for them to launch in. Very good from an infra perspective, as we've spoke before. Very bad from anything else, right? So users are jaded. Everything is farmed to, I believe, its extents. Capital is giga mercenary. Like Interop becoming fundamental kind of deleted a lot of the tribalism that existed before, that I think was kind of like one of the levers that chains had that they've completely lost. Or, Bera was maybe the last one that kind of lost that, and it's incredibly difficult to build it again. While at the same time, these chains are like, they were never more different. They were never more opinionated. They were, it's actually kind of sad to see, because from an infra or pure tech looking perspective, it's wow, fucking amazing. We have this like amazing plethora of new things and new possibilities being built, but the market and users are just don't give a fuck, basically.
I mean, I honestly think like I'm literally on the opposite end of this take, because I feel like chains had a great year. One, because of your opinion that like they were super opinionated, and this is the first time we had so much diversity. And if you look at the launches, even for a bear market, the numbers are actually decent. Not from like day one bridging volume perspective, but look at Plasma, look at Stable. Like those two launches in particular, I think they had over $1 billion in like locked capital on day one. Now, there
Yeah,
are other cases, and capital is mercenary and like it's moving around. But from a chain launch perspective, I don't think you can do a lot better, especially in a bear market.
I disagree. And I disagree to a point, because all of these chain launches were heavily incentivized. And so,
I
of
mean, of
course,
course, like what else are they
you
supposed to do?
of course, but it's not a true measure of a success, right? The true measure of a success would be like, for example, Plasma is pretty successful, given that they're, I think, like what, 6, 7 on the TVL side after the incentive stopped. So this is an accomplishment. The rest, not so much, right? Like you can't like the measure cannot be, hey, Arjun, I'll give you 100 euros if you come to my house, and you come and like, told you he's gonna come, right? Like that's not a measure of success. This measure of success is like 3 months, 6 months afterwards. What's your TVL looking? What's the activity looking? What's the number of transactions? And that is pretty jaded.
I think that just general purpose chains are dead, right? Like if you just like launch a new chain and then you just like run that playbook, I think that just doesn't work anymore, right? So either you build a chain that's purpose built for like a specific thing or has a specific feature, like I don't know, it's very fast or very whatever, like very decentralized or whatever you could do, or you launch a chain because you want a settlement layer for your existing distribution, which is kind of, I guess, like what Plasma and the stable type of chains are doing is kind of the opposite of that. They're building the settlement layer and then they're working on the application on top, and that's kind of like why they want a chain. The question is like, does it make sense to launch the chain so much earlier than the application?
There's
I would say
never
no.
going to be a right answer.
I mean, it kind of is, right? Like it's a massive strain on a budget, focus, and everything to do that before
Well,
you have
how do you
distribution.
get like apps to build on your chain if there's no chain?
Well, you build the distribution first.
Yeah,
Right? Like
it's the users of your app.
Yeah. The ideal example of this is actually Tempo, right? Like it's a perfect culmination of everything. Existing distribution on the B2B side and the B2C side, actual need, like the chain purpose built for what their need today is. As much as I hate it, not hate it, like as much as I don't like that it's a outside of crypto native player that will most probably take a lot of volume.
With your logic, only players that have existing distributions can launch a chain. Like nobody in crypto is going to launch a chain if that's the case.
Well, we should not launch that many chains. Yes, like be more purposeful about it, right? Like why?
But Marko, you
would
like
have...
when new chains are being launched.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you
I
benefit
need it
from
for yes, we benefit from it, but we also need to be intellectually honest. Like, do we need those? Like, probably not. Right? Especially given that what we have today is not getting fulfilled. And on top of that, like I understand if you're a chain that's coming in like, like SoFun, oh, we're going to be the social layer or whatever, or you're abstract, like trying something new, like outside of the paradigm of financial aspect that we have today. But if you're coming in with like, hey, we're going to do 10x the TPS, go fuck yourself. Like, who cares? Like literally, who cares? No one cares. The chains today are not fulfilling all of the TPSs that you need another one with 10K or 100K or 500K. Like, who cares? No one. right?
I mean, we don't care
That's my
today,
point.
but like 10 years from now, we will care. If the usage
course.
actually comes to a point where like we're competing with Visa and all the existing rails, like you will care. You need more TPS.
Yes,
I mean,
but in 10 years, the hardware, like for example, Solana is going to do like 2 million TPS in 10 years because the hardware is going to get that much better, right? Like, so
I mean, there's also trade-offs, right? Like, I mean, my biggest like takeaway from this year in terms of like trade-offs is like, you know, Solana is not very expressive as a chain. Like the there's huge constraints and like how many bytes you can fit into a transaction, how expressive your transactions can be. And that definitely comes at a huge disadvantage for a lot of things. I think generally like blockchains are state machines, right? So if you don't have any state to fit into the state machine, then you kind of like have missed the purpose of a blockchain. So,
State's
and
not
that's a chicken
changing.
egg problem. It's a chicken egg problem, right? But like realistically, you should have state, and then once your state becomes saturated, you should find out ways to grow it further, and not, you know, have a lot of empty state that you're paying for, in money, incentives, and other things, and then, you know, have that run for it. It just never really worked.
Tom, did we do your take on this question? Like, biggest
Yeah,
flop?
my take is the biggest flop this year is definitely Axela. I mean, it was kind of it was a flop coming, as you know, obviously they got essentially annihilated by the other players in the Interop wars, and were kind of like the, you know, the odd child out, just like existing, and now we have this Circle takeover, which obviously is great for Circle. A little bit awkward with this whole, you know, community takeover or whatever we want to call this.
I mean,
Yeah,
is it
this
though?
is. I mean, this
It
used to
is.
be, right. Like back in the day, Axela used to be a very respected team, and a lot of people would have thought like 3-4 years ago that Axela would be one of the major companies in crypto. So this is kind of like a pretty large fall from grace.
I think this is honestly one of the best reminders that you cannot buy a token for the long term in crypto. Like I don't think I can get myself to buy a token for like 18 months or 24 months. Like there's no point. At any point there can be an acquisition and you can just be left stranded as a token holder. So I think I'm
Yes.
gonna steer clear from that.
I mean, it's a strong case for MetaDAO.
Sure, go buy the token. Okay, no, don't buy the token. Like this is not financial
Not
advice.
financial advice.
Yeah. I do want to segue into the other question on his response, because my response is the same as his on the second question, which is basically the biggest surprise that shocked everyone. Circle buying Axelar did surprise me quite a bit.
Yeah. But honestly, it
Quite a
did
bit.
not surprise me. I did not see Axelar being bought out, but I did see acquisitions happening because this is the ideal period, right? Like Interop has matured enough. There are winners. You can clearly see who has more adoption. And it is a bear market. So these conditions are ripe for acquisitions and consolidation.
Yeah, I think what was surprising is just like who they were acquired by, and also like the terms of the acquisition, because it's functionally more like an acqui-hire, and then you kind of have this like orphan, and that's like felt kind of under thought out in many ways.
Tom, what's your biggest surprise?
I mean, he already said that, no?
That was the
I would
last
say
category.
my biggest
pick a different
surprise
one.
is near intense this year. It's kind of interesting to see that. Well, I mean, obviously they're a large player in the market, right? Like I assume like that. I mean, I haven't looked at the charts, but I assume near intense probably still like one of the top 20 like chains in terms of like TVL, or sorry, in terms of market cap. And obviously they were working, I guess last year they were working on kind of like their chain abstraction stuff, and then pivoted more towards like just like purely doing near intense, which uses some of the MCP stuff, but the sorry, MPC stuff. But it was quite interesting to see that there's still enough room in the Interop vertical for a new player to grab like a decent amount of market share by kind of like going after underserved chains that other
And
players in the
assets.
market and assets that other players in the market couldn't really serve or didn't want to serve due to their architectural limitations. So that was quite surprising that they came up so quickly.
I think in Interop, there's one case study every year where it's either a chain or a team just popping out of nowhere. Like earlier, it was Solana, and everybody who bet early on Solana, like they won big time. This time, it was Hyperliquid, but a lot of Interop teams were actually faster, so there was no like clear winner out of it. But there were clearly bigger losers out of that, like Hyperliquid seeing a lot of volume, and Near Intense again, like nobody saw that coming, but they had a different go-to-market strategy and still managed to win like a decent amount of like
Yeah.
volume. Do you
Do
guys
you
think from next year, uh, like these opportunities will still be there, or do you think like we'll get more and more mature and these opportunities will just extinct slowly?
I th- I think the opportunities will always be there, because in the, like, last year we recorded this, previous years we did not, but we were less shocked or surprised by things that happened in the industry. And I think it's just like, you don't like, there's Relay as a bridge, for example, in 2024. That kind of changed the paradigm of thinking for me from like, how much people actually care about decentralization, which I thought is like a big thing. Got proven that it isn't. And so like, I think every year something's gonna happen that we have to kind of reassess our baseline thinking in a way about things. I don't. So for example, it's also a culmination of things. Like how much would Near Intents be successful if not for Zcash and the narrative around Zcash, for example, right? So like, again, no idea. They'd probably be successful, but not nearly as they are because of the privacy narrative. So, which is kind of like, why that happened. Is it chat control in Europe? Is it whatever reason? No idea. But it is kind of a culmination of different things that leads to that. So yes, I would presume it's going to happen next year as well with something.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be surprises. There's always going to be opportunity. Like there's just going to be consensus, and people just like try to do non-consensus stuff and get rewarded for it just through like sheer probability of like entropy and randomness. And like an interesting and like observation I just had about Near Intents is that yes, their go-to-market was different. They went to Zcash, which they got rewarded handsomely with, but they also went to like Stellar and Ripple and stuff like that. And that was the exact same strategy that Axler had, like minus Zcash, right? Like they went really hard on Ripple, didn't really get rewarded for it, but like they just didn't have Zcash, and like that's why outcomes look completely different a year later.
Timing was totally different, I guess. Like Near Intense timed it perfectly.
Well, the question is, did they time it perfectly, or did they just
No,
like
they were ready
get
for
like
yeah.
essentially you get lucky with these things, right? Like in a
Yeah.
way, if we look at Li-Fi, you can say like Li-Fi timed it perfectly, but like in a way we were just at the right place at the right time. And then obviously you need to deliver, right? Like this is not like you can be at the right place at the right time and then shit your pants, as many of our competitors have done in the past. But you still need to deliver and have a good product, actually. And I think like this was the case with Near Intents, and that was the case with maybe Relay last year for like some of the longer tail stuff.
Jim, what's your biggest surprise for this year?
Biggest surprise. I mean, like Polymarket was a really big surprise for me in like a non-interop sense. Like I didn't really see prediction markets really taking off as big as it did, and obviously they had that huge $1 billion investment earlier this year, which was like I think still today the largest crypto investment of a round, and so that was just like a big wow for me. Also, like perps taking off as a category, like obviously Hyperliquid was like something that I knew was coming down the pipeline, but seeing a lot of these like copycats come out, seeing the huge like, you know, Coinbase acquisition to go in on derivatives, like that was really interesting to see. And I was just like, holy crap, like this is like, everyone's been talking about like derivatives and perps for like a really long time. There's been a lot of like shots at goal, a lot of misses, but now this like fever pitch has been kind of exploding, and now we're seeing like legitimate projects being built.
I think for me, it was also the EF and how active they were this year. So it was a surprise in a good way, right? This year we had the OIF, we had the EIL as well. So just the Ethereum Foundation being super active, and now it feels like they've turned the page, and Ethereum marketing actually looks really cool, like with the graphics and the new video stuff as well. So I think the EF is back at the wheel, and I like it. I'm here for it.
Yeah, that was definitely a really big narrative Dev Connect, was just like the EF like has all this new blood in. They like expanded the teams, they got new directors, and all this like new blood is like they're very like go to market heavy as opposed to like more research heavy. And like you can feel their presence there. Like they were like super active and way more on it in terms of like listening to founders, listening to projects, providing feedback. And that was, yeah, I mean, like I don't think anyone had that in their bingo card like this time last year, that the EF would kind of like turn around narrative wise and like brand wise.
Best new launch of 2025. What stood out for you guys? I can get you guys started. So USDT Zero was launched in 2025. I think a lot of us will find it hard to believe that it's only been 11, 12 months, but they've done $50 billion in volume already. And I did not see this coming at all. I mean, obviously, they're standing on the shoulders of giants with USDT, but the way they've executed like their go-to-market strategy, everything just works. They're part of like every new launch, and even from like a narrative perspective, if you look at stable chains, all of these chains are using USDT as the gas token, right? And USDT Zero is the token of choice. So I think that was the best launch for me this year.
I'm actually going to like there's I think like there's a best launch that's very, very underrated, and that's Inkchain. I think like almost nobody has Inkchain on their radar. But if you look at like the Falama, if you look at the graph, it's actually up only. And if you look at the strategy that Kraken has been running in terms of like doing the deal with Aave, doing the acquisitions, doing now the acquisition of Backed, it shows that they're playing like long-term games with long-term people, and they have a really, really long-term thesis on like why they need a chain and how to build it. And I think like this is really the playbook if you're a bigger player in the market and you want to do this, you want to go in this on-chain direction, you want to like participate in the DeFi mullet, which obviously like, I mean, sure, they're using somewhat like Coinbase's playbook, but that's just like shown to them in the market that is proven. And I think the way they're executing it is really, really well done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody is talking about Kraken, so that's a good shot. Dom always comes in with these left curve takes, and then
Yeah.
6 months down the line, he's gonna ask me if he can clip this. When like Kraken has their moment.
It's a good one.
What about you, Marco?
I don't have any. I have literally zero launches that come to mind that stood out.
Come on, maybe one of the chain launches that you so love.
I mean, so like, okay, I don't want to like not necessarily single out all of the launches post Bera, like chain launches. So stable, plasma, monad. It's like someone has just like thrown fairy dust at them, and the chain, like the launch itself from an infra perspective, was really well handled. That I cannot say for any other chain launch before that. Like really well handled. Like from just like stupid shit, RPCs, like stuff like that were failing. So people learned how to launch a chain, which is amazing.
Huge. Jim,
Yes,
what
it is
about you?
huge.
Jim, what's your best new launch?
I mean, I'm kind of like with Marko. Like, there's not really been anything like super interesting that like really caught my attention. Like, sure, there's like some new trading apps that are kind of interesting, like FOMO and fun and stuff like that. But like for them, it's more like a slow burn, right? It wasn't like it came out and everyone's like, oh my god, we have to like use this, right? I mean, kind of a cop out answer, but I'm gonna tip my own hat and say Composer. Like, I think Composer is like really big. We haven't really even put a lot of splash behind it, but it is an absolute game changer in my opinion. Do anything you want on any chain with a click, and we built it in a very sustainable, scalable way. Like it's going to spread like wildfire next year.
Shout out to our research team.
This is
Yes,
the
sir.
Easter egg of this year. Like last year, it was Jim being on the episode without
Yeah.
without like officially joining LI.F. Like that news was still not out, and this year he's talking about Composer, which is also not out technically. So
Well, you're gonna be
this
able
is
to you're,
the
you're gonna be able to try it on Jumper on January 13th, 14th. So
good way to close the loop. Okay, because we're all cross-chain experts, so I think this is a good question for this crowd. Best cross-chain UX in the wild.
Jumper Exchange, by
Okay,
far.
you will go last because you're obviously very very biased. We
Okay.
all are, but like you are extra biased. No.
Still go with the wallets. Like, I mean, I wouldn't like single out one of them. I think it's like, you know, I think like probably like Phantom, Ruby, and MetaMask are still like the furthest ahead in terms of like, and they've been adding a lot of like new ecosystems, a lot of like new asset types. Yeah, I think like the cross-chain UX on like the major wallets is really, really good now. And it's kind of like the benchmark for the entire market, and also kind of what we use as like our marquee clients to sell the stuff to other people.
Makes sense. What about you, Jim?
Wait, I gotta go with a really deep cut just to flex how much I know about cross chain. But I gotta go Kohaku wallet. My friends over at Wonderland building Kohaku wallet. It is an EF sponsored project that is basically taking a wallet and embedding all these new ERCs to it. So it has shit like interoperable addresses. So you can like send, with an ENS like domain into different chains. There's like a chain tag or a chain subdomain with it. It has resource locks. It has privacy preservation. It has a bunch of really cool stuff. And so it's probably the best, in class wallet experience right now. It's not like a wallet in the sense that like people are using it and they're putting money into it. It's more like a showcase. But I mean, I'm kind of cheating here because you didn't really set rules in your question.
Nice. I mean that's a good shout. I think a lot of people can go check it out. I don't think it has the right amount of mind share right now, so that's a good shout, especially for even the Interop crowd. I think my answer is FOMO, by the way, because I feel like they've done chain abstraction properly. Like when I'm using FOMO, I'm using a social app with like trading built in as a game, and I don't really think about which chain my asset is on. So it's not technically like cross chain UX, but I think from a multi chain UX perspective, I think the UX is spot on. And even the onboarding and everything, like everything has been thought of properly. So I genuinely feel like I can get my friends onboarded to FOMO and like make them buy meme coins.
Just that there are no meme coins to buy anymore.
Next cycle.
I have to
Hopefully
say
not.
Jumper, because like you can bring your simple wallet, you can bring your complex wallet, but the point being is you can get anywhere, any asset, and soon any protocol as well. And so if you want to onboard your friends, grandmas, whoever, Jumper is probably the best way to do it because it's the least amount of research needed, least amount of clicks needed to get to the desired spot, and it actually looks nice. So
Nice. So Marko got his plugin. That's all he came for. But last question before we end this: 2026 predictions for Interop. What's next? Nice. Nobody wants to go first.
Well, I go first. I mean, with Jim's baby LI.F intents coming up, I think we're heading towards the year of resource locks, and what resource locks finally will unlock on top of everything that we already have unlocked is basically truly like instant UX. I think like so far there's still always a little bit of a delay, and there's still a little bit of like some other stuff going on in the background in terms of latency. But with resource locks, we'll be able to have truly instant UX, and so it will make cross-chain feel the same as same chain essentially.
Jim,
So
are you
by
bullish? Sorry, go on.
so by an extension, that would also mean that like the current winners in intents, for example, that are basically centralized solvers, will either have to reinvent themselves or die.
No. Why would that be the case? Like resource logs
So
don't change too much for solvers. If anything, like they make things more capital efficient because like you have better guarantees.
for solvers, yes. I mean, for bridges that are just solvers, they just become a solver in another system, basically.
I don't think so. Because that's like a totally different use case. So I think resource logs is something that the solvers, like the proper solvers, not like bridge solvers, will go after, and the bridges will stay within their domain.
Okay, so let me rephrase. If you have a more secure, faster way to manage the dynamic between a user and a solver, why do you need relay? And where does relays or any other bridge like relays USP then hangs?
Yeah, I think it would still be the same unique selling point, because like if I'm on the front end today of like relay, I don't think I'm missing out on anything, right? Like there's optimizations in terms of speed. Like you can always be faster, but like I think the average transfer time today is like 1 or 2 seconds, and I think their edge is in the solver inventory, right? Like, and the fact that they've been able to crack rebalancing at that scale. So I think like every bridge has its own sort of like edge and unique selling point. I don't think resource logs will change that, at least for the good bridges out there. But Jim is the expert in house, so he can probably educate all of us.
I mean, like, I see where you guys are both coming from. Like, there is a world where, you have a resource lock and there's some sort of like standard of like, you know, broadcasting your intent and then having a lock, and then it can like go to a solver. I mean, like broadly, that's just kind of like what, intent standardization looks like. We're like trying to find a way in which we don't really need bespoke contracts or bespoke escrows or like any sort of like bespoke way in which order flow like appears, and like a global pool of solvers just like observe it. And I think like resource locks kind of like standardizes that in some way, because in some ways it is kind of like a standard escrow that has some like unique quirks to it that make it a lot faster and a lot more capital efficient. But in many ways, it can also happen with like 7683. So I agree that like it doesn't need to have resource locks in it, but it could still happen. But I think it's probably better. It's more likely to happen with resource locks.
Mm-hmm. So you're bullish on the adoption of resource logs going into next year.
I'm like cautiously optimistic. Like I see the benefit of it. I also see like the hurdle of like adopting something that like has marginal benefit, especially to start. So it'll definitely come down to like wallet adoption. And we have like some good projects that are kind of like beating the drum and trying to like lead the way on that. So I'll let them kind of like do that. But like to answer the question broadly of like what's next for Interop next year, I do think like the design space is like getting smaller and smaller, just because it is like quickly becoming a solved problem, or at least like solved enough for the layperson. I do think like connecting beyond just tokens becomes really interesting into like vault positions and just sort of any sort of end state or state change that you want any chain becomes really interesting. obviously that's, what Composer does and what I'm really excited about. I also think like there is a new set of solvers coming, or even a maturation of an existing set of solvers that are becoming very sophisticated. And so they can offer things like, predictive pricing or fixed pricing, incredibly fast. And yeah, like, people are getting very serious about solving. And so I feel like we're going to evolve in terms of what cross-chain looks like and set even a higher standard where it becomes like instantaneous via resource locks. It's natively gasless, of course, also via resource locks if you need to. It's fixed pricing. It's predictive timing, and it becomes a lot more mature in many ways.
I think that's also my prediction for next year. Composability is the next trend in Interop. Like we've fixed the simple step transactions in a way. Now it's time to like make everything happen all at once across different chains. And I think if there are there's any specific category of teams in crypto that can do this, it is Interop teams, because nobody has that experience of like working across 50 plus chains, right? Like, and then across all of these different formats. And I feel like next year that should be the trend where we're able to compose any sort of action on chain, which will actually boost crypto adoption, crypto UX even further, and then the chain can matter even lesser. So shout out to the chain abstraction guy.
And that's almost like I keep on calling that kind of like the singularity, because like there's all these different teams have been building in this like these adjacent verticals, and they're all kind of like moving to this like singularity point from different like starting points. But I think I agree with you, Arjun. I don't think like there isn't any teams that are in better position than Interop teams or teams like ours who've been doing this for years. They know the ins and outs of the problem. I think if you're coming at this problem from slightly different verticals, you're going to have to learn a lot of the unknown. Like you're going to run into the unknown unknowns for you that are already known unknowns for the other players in the market. And when that happens, you essentially just like, you get kicked out of the race. Like it's really hard to start this if you don't already have the expertise and a team in house that has been like thinking about this for years.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense, right? Like cross-chain is the most difficult problem to solve for years, and any team that has at their own level or for their own purpose solved the cross-chain aspect of it, the rest comes easy. And so wherever they kind of venture out as the verticalization happens, they're more inclined to win. And I think like my recommendation prediction would be very much in line with the three of you, which is basically just like Interop in 2026 is going to be very boring, and people won't even know it exists, which is actually pretty cool. I don't think we're going to have any more distinctions between like same chain and cross chain. Everything will just feel like an action, like a thing, irrelevant of like what's included inside in terms of steps or chains or assets or whatever.
Nice. Well, that was the year-end episode. Thanks a lot for your time and your opinions. I think it's always interesting to like look back on these things and sort of even from the perspective of going into the next year, like what are we all excited about? So hopefully for anyone that's watching this, you're as much into the Interop weeds as we are, and you enjoy the episode. So thank you for your time.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Thank you, sirs.